So I've been talking about money for a while now, and one thing that I've noticed is that sometimes there seems to be a misunderstanding between what it means to be frugal and what it means to be cheap, with some people thinking that those terms mean the same thing, so they'll often use them interchangeably and not always in a positive light. And for that reason, sometimes being frugal can be seen as a negative thing. Now, it's true that a frugal person and a cheap person are both interested in saving money, but it's really a different mindset. So today we're going to clear up some of those misconceptions and dive into how these two terms differ. So when it comes to deciding the most effective approach, a frugal person often considers the big financial picture, whereas a cheap person might not. The best way for me to describe this point is with an illustration, and for this I'm going to pull from a real life scenario. So let's say you're planning a vacation. Now, I'm all for vacationing on a budget, and when booking a hotel, many people will look for a low-cost hotel, and they might even check areas away from the tourist attractions to save money. Now, if the person booking this hotel is a cheap person, the distance doesn't matter. They don't care about the hotel being several miles away from everything, or the fact that they might have a 20 or 30 minute back and forth commute. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is that they found the cheapest hotel, and that is where they're going to stay, even if the hotel is only slightly cheaper than closer options. In their mind, they found an amazing deal. But what this person might fail to consider is that the further away they are from the things that they are interested in, the more driving they have to do. And for this illustration, we're going to assume that they actually flew into their destination, so they don't have a personal vehicle with them. So because of the far location of the hotel, now they might have to rent a car for several days or use rideshare services. They have to put gas in the rental, and if they're in the city, they have to pay to park the car, which isn't always cheap. So at the end of the day, yes, they found a cheaper hotel miles away or maybe in a nearby city, but that decision to stay farther away might have ended up costing them more money because now they have to add in other costs. However, a frugal person considers the big picture when doing the math, and they consider how the decision to stay farther away impacts their total cost. So they might determine that staying in a closer hotel, although slightly more expensive, is actually the cheaper option because they might be able to walk or take the subway to most places and avoid the extra transportation costs. A cheap person also uses price as their bottom line, whereas a frugal person uses value as their bottom line. And this is really a key difference between the two, because a cheap person, they are less likely to care about the quality of an item or how long it'll last. For them, it's all about the price and how much money they can save. If it's the lowest price on the shelf, that's what they're going to buy, no questions asked, and there's really no convincing them otherwise. But the problem with this approach is that they can end up spending way more because some of the items might not last nearly as long, so they have to frequently replace them. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to pay big bucks for everything, but for those things that you're likely to use often, if you can afford to spend a little extra and buy things that last, you will almost always save money in the long term, and a frugal person knows this, and they also realize that you really do get what you pay for, so in most cases, they are willing to save up and pay more for certain things. Another difference is that a cheap person might not spend any money at all. Now, obviously, this doesn't apply to every cheap person, but for those who fall into this category, they might even go as far as denying themselves things that they actually need. They might forgo having a social life because they don't want to spend anything on entertainment, or they might wear very worn clothes because they don't want to spend money on new ones. A frugal person, on the other hand, is completely different because they know how to strike a healthy balance between saving and spending. So when it comes to things like entertainment or shopping or even splurging, they're not afraid to spend money, but rather they are mindful and deliberate with the money they do spend. And what I mean by saying deliberate is that they will usually prioritize the things that are most important to them and then spend their money in those areas. And they also know where their money goes, and they will plan out big purchases. In addition, some cheap people don't value their time, whereas a frugal person does. Time is a very valuable commodity because once it's gone, and you can't buy any more, so you really have to use your time wisely. So with that being said, even though a frugal person will look for deals and bargains, and they'll even wait for sales, they're also reasonable with their time. So they're not going to spend a crazy amount of time and effort looking for ways to save a buck because they know this can backfire. And to give you an example, a cheap person might drive 5 miles out of their way just to save 5 cents per gallon of gas and then act like they struck gold. But what they're failing to realize is that they're actually wasting gas in the process, not to mention their time. Or to save $100, they might tackle a home repair project themselves that they're clearly not qualified to tackle, and then they end up making the problem worse and they still have to call someone in to fix it. And finally, some cheap people will go to the extreme to save money. And it doesn't matter if it's unfair or if it's breaking the rules. If there is an opportunity for them to save, they are going to take advantage of it. I was watching something a while ago about cheap people and some of the things that they would do to save money, and some of it was pretty wild. You would have people who would go as far as doing dishonest or even illegal things just to save a few bucks. There was this one lady who, whenever she needed something new, she would shop lost and found boxes, or she would like rummage through the Goodwill drop-off sites. And there was this lady who would spend hours every single day writing complaint letters to like food manufacturers so she could get free food and like coupons and other freebies so she wouldn't have to pay anything for food. And personally, I've seen several cheap people in action, and I think that's why it might annoy me when I hear someone refer to a frugal person as being cheap, because cheap people will often complain about the price of everything even when it's not expensive, and they can also be some of the biggest freeloaders. To give you an example, they might invite a group of people out to eat, but then don't order anything for themselves, but instead they'll munch on the free chips and salsa all night. Or they might always conveniently not have cash on them and have to borrow money, but then they don't pay the person back. Now, this isn't to say that a frugal person can't use unconventional methods to save money, but even if their approach leans a little bit on the extreme side, it's often not dishonest or at the expense of others. So that's all that I have for you guys today. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and if you did, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, do consider subscribing. We talk a lot about money topics, so if you like videos like this, I do post every weekend and sometimes during the week. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in a few days.